Welcome to this editing behind the scenes where I'll walk you through how I edited this image. So get cozy, grab a beverage of choice, and hang out while I yap about this edit. So first thing, I am creating a background copy as I always do, and we're going to retouch with I think it's the retouch tool, the magic one, the AI one. And I use that one when my computer is cooperating. Sometimes it doesn't work. So yeah. Now I've added a high contrast layer to the image, and if you are confused why the colors are crazy, I will link a video below on why and how I add that layer. It really just helps to see color contrast within the product. It's really great for seeing those imperfections, and also if you are adjusting like levels or colors, it's just really great. So I'll link that below, and now I'm just going through turning the layer on and off so that I can see what I want to edit. Sometimes I want to see the imperfections in the color, sometimes I want to see it with that off, but now I'm just working on the bag and trying to get rid of all of the smudges on this translucent part of the bag. The candies were gummy and they left a little bit of a residue, so I just wanted to clean it up a little bit, make it look pretty. At some point in this video, I also edit the bag, but in this case, I get bored and my ADHD goes wild and I want to move on. So we're moving on to the seam where I'm going to use Generative fill to get rid of it. And it does a mediocre job, which is why I end up flattening that layer. I just merge the Generative fill layer and my background copy together, and I'm going to end up doing a frequency separation. So I have an action where I can rename my layer to background copy and press play on the action, and it will automatically run the frequency separation action. First, I attempt to try to use the spot healing brush, and it doesn't really work, and so I just end up resulting to that frequency separation, and so I give up here and run my action. So the top layer is my texture and the bottom layer is my color. So currently I'm sampling the color, made a mistake. Now I actually sample it. There we go. Sample the color and brush it out. Working on making sure that everything is blending seamlessly. I do go in to the texture layer here in a sec, and there you go. Brush in all of the texture so that it looks like it was all one block. Okay, so now I'm gonna crop it, and the reason that I photographed this at a landscape positioning was that I wanted to be able to like choose how wide I cropped it, and I knew that it was going to end up being 4x5 for Instagram and socials, but I wanted to have all of the room that I could on the sides because of the shadows, and that I just knew in the very beginning that that's how I was going to photograph it, and this is how I was going to edit it. So I've created a layer to fill that in, and again, I sampled the color and dropped it on a new layer, and I'm now going in just with the paintbrush tool on a lower opacity and just sampling from the image and painting onto the blank layer to just kind of match the color and blend out that seam. Because later what I'm going to do is add another color over top of it, and I want that seam to be gone and it to all blend smoothly, but I still want to keep those shadows. So now I'm going to work on separating the products from the background, and usually like 90% of the time I use the pen tool, but I was feeling a little lazy when I was editing this. I don't know why. I thought that using the lasso tool and the object selection tool would be a little bit faster, and it wasn't. Just suck it up and use the pen tool. It's worth it. So I'm just going in and refining my selection with the lasso tool, and then I'm going to end up making a path out of it in a second. So I'm just going in and refining everything. Okay, so I made that selection into a path, and if you do Command click, then you can make that selection of your path. But I'm going to exit out of it just so that I can make another path of the background. So I'm making that separation, and now I have a background path. I'm going to sample the color of the background and fill it on a brand new layer. And then I need to make the selection of, my product and the fruits and put that on its own layer. So I've got all three separated. I've got the base, the products and the fruit, and then the background, all on their own layers. I realized at this point that my selection sucked and I had to go in again and refine it. So I go to my original layer, duplicate the parts that were missing, and just merge those pieces together. I do the same thing with the grapes on the left-hand side here. I realize there's huge gaping holes. So again, lasso tool, make those selections and merge it after I make the copy. So now that I have a better selection, I'm going to do a little bit more retouching on the block here. I had realized that because my selection was so wonky that I had to figure out where the heck that berry smudge was coming from and what layer it was on. So don't be like me and make the mistake of not just freaking using the pen tool. And then I realized that all of those little berry hairs were covered up by the backdrop, so I just went in with the eraser tool and erased them from the backdrop. But I think later on I realized that they're still covering them anyways because I switch it to a gradient, so it doesn't even matter. This point is useless. But that's okay, because now you can see that I had good intentions. Okay, so now that I have everything on its own layer, I'm going to go to my Millinote board where I manage all of my client projects and sample the hex code that my client sent me so that I am getting the exact colors and drop them into Photoshop's color picker hex code. I'm going to do that for my background and then do the same thing for my foreground. I'm throwing it on a new layer because it's going to be covering both the original shadows and the color that I painted over before. And then I'm going to paste it in, but I'm going to change the blend mode to color first. I realized that it looks like poo. And then I change it to soft light, and that looks much better. So it's not the exact color that the client sent me. So I just create a little sample on a new layer and drop in her actual color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a levels adjustment layer to the base layer. And that way I can bring the levels and the brightness up to close to what she had. And I don't do it perfectly because I still want to be able to see those shadows really nicely. And so I picked a good point where the shadows and the color looked pretty close. So at this point, I'm feeling good about it, but still feel like it's a little bit flat. So I go to my gradient tool and I start messing with some gradients to see what might look good. And so at first I try from top down. I go from the corner to the other corner and still not loving it. So ultimately I end up deciding to do it kind of coming from behind the product like it's showing here, but I switch it to a radial gradient so it just flows out more evenly, and I switch it so it's inverted and pull it right behind the product, and it just kind of gives it a glow and makes it pop a little bit more. And just messing around trying to find the right spot for it. Once it feels good, then I want to make the logo pop a little bit more. So I'm going into, I added a selective color adjustment layer, and then I go to the top and select a color range. And by doing this, I can just select the white of the product, and I have to figure it out a little bit better. This first time I do my selection, it's not perfect. Like, I'm getting some of the lightness of the bag in it, and I really just want to, you know, single out that logo. So there's the better selection. I was able to single it out a little bit better, and then I'm going to drag my slider and make it pop. I added a hue and saturation layer just to make the colors on the bag pop a little bit more. And now I'm just going to, again, go back into some retouching just because my paths didn't end up lining up perfectly from my background and foreground layer. And then when I lightened the raspberry, or when I lightened the bottom foreground layer of the block, it changed the color of the raspberry juice that was falling down onto the block. So I just wanted to get rid of that so that it didn't look weird and overexposed. And so here I'm just kind of playing around with it and fixing that final edge. Kind of looked funny, and there was some weird separation. Like, I couldn't figure out why the grapes were not touching the actual edge of the block. It was just some trial and error, and sometimes that's what it takes when you're in Photoshop. And then I start to refine the edges a little bit more because, again, my selection was the worst. Oh, and then touching up the grapes because the little dots were kind of freaky. So here we are refining the edge. And what you could do also is make your selection and like contract the edge by just a couple pixels and then delete that. But I decided to paint it out, or erase it out in this case. At this point, I felt like the bag had a couple hot spots, so I added a brightness and contrast layer and then filled it with black so that it wasn't affecting the entire image. And then I just painted in those hot spots that I felt were too bright. And then at this point, I decided to do more frequency separation. So I did a Shift Command Option E, which merges all of the layers on top of everything that you've done. And then I did my frequency separation action, and I'm going through here and just touching up the bag. I just felt like it was a little crispy looking, like too edgy, and had some weird stuff going on. Like, you could see the supplement facts behind it, and I didn't want to be able to see that. So just used the whatever that tool is called, you know, the mixer brush tool, that's the one. So I used the mixer brush tool on my color layer to help blend those colors together, but I'm also keeping the texture with that top layer, which is, you know, the top layer. And once again, refining my selection. Don't be like me, guys. Don't not use the pen tool. Or in other words, use the pen tool the first time. It was It was one of those days. Sometimes you just try to take shortcuts and it doesn't work in your favor. Okay, I'm feeling really good about it, but I wanted to do one final adjustment to the bag. It was feeling a little dark, so I go and I add a levels adjustment layer just to the bag using the object selection tool and toggle that on and off, and you can see it just looks so much brighter, so much better, and that's closer to what the bag looks like in person. Once I'm feeling good about everything, I save it. I should have been saving it throughout so that my computer doesn't crash. I really do have a good computer. It's just, sometimes when you have a million layers, Photoshop doesn't like to work. So I just created a group with all the layers so that you can see the before and after. If you have any questions about the editing process, any specific editing questions, throw those down in the comments below. And I hope you learned something today. And thank you so much for watching.